Hello gaming friends, DM Samuel here again, and in this episode we are going to talk about Chapter 2 in the Pathfinder core rulebook. So let's actually just go there right now. This is the art from the page opposite the beginning of Chapter 2. If we run down here, you see here's Chapter 2, Ancestries and Backgrounds. I want to pause for a second though, and I want to talk about this art. I gushed about the art of the core rulebook cover in the last episode, and you can see it above my head. There's the Pathfinder symbol, and then the rectangle above that is the actual core rulebook cover drawn by Wayne Reynolds. I don't know who did this art. It's a beautiful piece of art. It has it's obviously a village in the treetops, and you can see there are rope bridges here with wooden planks coming across from one building to another. There's this very interesting sort of roundish oval structure here. You can see this very intricate designs on some of the roofs here. You can see a sort of balcony terrace place there, and you can see down here. You can see some of the iconics again, and then you can see different individuals talking. And this is a very nice piece of art. Don't get me wrong, but I do want to say that this piece is very evocative of Christmas for me. The color scheme seems like Christmas. All of these greenish leaves with these red, they look like poinsettias or poinsettias, however you want to pronounce that. And you can see that sort of all over. And so it feels very Christmassy to me. So it has a very different tone and connotation to me than just here we are in a fantasy elvish city. But it's a beautiful piece of work, just not maybe my favorite. I'm kind of making fun of it, but I'm saying it's really good. But, you know, not every piece of art has to be the piece that a person loves unconditionally, for sure, right? It's great, just not really my style. So let's, having said that, let's actually move on to Chapter 2. We are going to talk about ancestries and backgrounds, and I'm not going to read all of the ancestry entries to you. You can do that yourself. Here's what I'm going to do, though. I'm going to talk to you about the format of the ancestry entries. I'm going to talk about what it means to actually be an ancestry or a heritage. And then I'm going to show you very quickly some of the highlights of each of the ancestries, okay? So this chapter begins with showing us, by the way, also you see here on the right-hand side, of course, as always, we have the sort of shortened table of contents so that we know exactly where we are in the book, and that's telling us we are in the Ancestries and Backgrounds area. And so I just want to talk to you for a moment about what that means. What an ancestry is what would be called a race in another game. So in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and even in Pathfinder 1st edition, and in other fantasy RPGs, and in other sci-fi RPGs even, they call this a race. So the ancestry is the new term for race. But you're going to see that you can have an ancestry, and you can have lots of different heritages attached to that. Also, what you're going to see is at the end of this chapter, we're going to bring in something called backgrounds. Now, if you play Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, backgrounds probably sounds like a very familiar thing. Backgrounds are the things that provide you with some tasks and skills and abilities that you are earning before your first day as an adventurer. Okay, ancestries, on the other hand, that is the stuff that you know how to do, the characteristics that you have about you as a person that are given to you based on the culture you were raised in and the type of society you were raised in, okay? And languages sort of go hand in hand with that because, of course, culture is a combination of food and language and how those things manifest into a behavior and a demeanor. And all of that stuff feeds back into ancestries, and ancestries can affect what type of background experiences you may have had. And so all of that stuff is in this chapter. So it's appropriate. Now, each of these ancestry entries are going to have a particular specific format, okay? And basically, there is going to be some narrative information about the ancestries. That is, it's going to tell us about the overall background, the sort of big picture, large umbrella background of the individual ancestries. And then it's going to tell us about the different heritages within those ancestries. And it's going to then give us some mechanical bits. Okay, so this chapter is full of narrative bits and mechanical bits. And the narrative bits are there so that you can make decisions about how you want to roleplay this character. They are really there to give you flavor, to give you ideas for you to bounce off of so that you can get an idea of whether you want to go with the standard, the sort of quote-unquote typical or maybe stereotypical member of that ancestry, or if you want to go against the grain and say, I'm not like that at all. The reason I'm an adventurer is that I'm different from everyone else in my ancestry. And so you can make those choices because you're going to have a solid knowledge base regarding what the typical behaviors, demeanor, and personality of those ancestries are. And so you get that narrative piece, which is in text, and I'll show you the format of that in a moment. And then you're going to get the mechanical bits. And the mechanical bits are the pieces of the ancestry that immediately slot into the character for the purposes of using the rules. Okay, for the purposes of using the rules. So that's the mechanical bits. And then we've got narrative bits. And so you're going to see that each of these ancestry entries have both of those. Okay, now in terms of the mechanical bits, you're going to find hit points because your ancestries do supply you a certain amount of hit points based on which ancestry you choose. You're going to be determining what size you are as an individual, and usually PCs are either small or medium size. Medium size is sort of the average size of an average human, okay? Speed is going to tell you how quickly you can move in one stride action, okay? So movement in this game, for example, in an encounter, is going to take place by striding. So you take what's called the stride action. That means you're going to move, and you can move a distance up to your speed. And so each ancestry has a speed associated with it. Also, each ancestry has an ability boost. Now, normally they have 2 or 3 ability boosts, and remember that at this point in time, this is really the first step in choosing and building your character. So we have 6 attributes: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, that are all sitting at 10 right now. And so when we talk about ability boosts, what we mean is that your ancestry is going to give you 2 or 3 abilities that are going to be boosted up by 2 points. Also, some of these ancestries come with ability flaws, and that is going to be one attribute or one statistic, one stat, one ability score that is going to go down by 2. So at the end of this process, at the end of choosing your ancestry and heritage, you actually may have, instead of having 6 attributes with a 10 in each, you might have 3 that have a 12, 1 that has a 10, and 1 with an 8. Okay? Now, those will still continue to change throughout the character creation process, but that's kind of what's going to happen here as you choose your ancestry. And so both those ability boosts and flaws are both given to you in the ancestry entry. Also, the ancestries come with a set of languages that you know just for choosing that ancestry. Okay? And also, most PCs know more than those languages. And the way that you determine whether you know more than those languages is that if you have an intelligence that is high enough to have a modifier, then that modifier, +1, +2, or +3, or +4, is going to determine how many extra languages you know over and above the initial languages. Now, the thing is that at this stage in character creation, you don't know what your intelligence modifier is yet, because we haven't completed the process and gone through and added all the boosts and removed all of the flaws. So we're not exactly sure at this point, so you can't really determine your languages until the end, and for that reason, there's another section about language at the end of this chapter. Okay. Also, your ancestry entry is going to tell you what traits now apply to your PC. Traits are little mechanical rules bits. They are little tags or keywords that tell you, or help you determine, I should say, whether a particular effect will be consequential to you. That is, does the effect of that spell or that situation, does it have a direct effect on you? For example, if there was a spell that just simply did not have an effect on elves, it would say this effect has no, this situation or this outcome has no effect on creatures with the elf trait. Okay, and so if you are an elf, you have the elf trait, and so that thing will not affect you whatsoever. Okay, that's just an example, okay, and we'll see more examples as we move on. So that's what traits are, and so every individual who creates a PC with one of these ancestries, you're going to get 2 tags. You're going to get the humanoid tag, because all of these ancestries in the core rulebook are humanoids, and you're also going to get your ancestral tag. So if you choose to be a dwarf, you're going to have the dwarf tag. If you choose to be an elf, you're going to have the elf tag. If you choose to be a human, you're going to have the human tag. And so you won't be an elf and a dwarf unless you decide that you're a half-elf with a dwarven heritage, which is something we'll talk about a little bit later. Along with those entries, you're also going to learn about some special abilities that you have because you are choosing that ancestry, and then you will choose a heritage. There will be many heritages that are supplied for each ancestry, and you choose one of those. Your ancestry and your heritage can never change, so whatever you choose is it for the life of that character. Okay, and then there are a selection of feats that you're going to be able to choose from. At first level, you get 1 ancestry feat. You also get another one. You gain another option to get an ancestry feat at level 5. That is 4 levels later. And then 4 levels after that, at level 9, you're going to get another. And then 4 levels after that at level 13. And then 4 levels after that at level 17. So you're going to get 5 ancestry feats throughout the life of this character, provided you go from levels 1 to 17. That is, you get 1 at 1st level, 1 at 5th level, 1 at 9th level, 1 at 13th level, and 1 at 17th level. So you will get 5 ancestry feats. All ancestries are the same in that respect. They all get a feat every 4th level. Now, having said that, it doesn't mean that there is a humongous selection of feats at every level. And so that's something that we're going to look at in a moment when we get to that section. So let's start out and let's look at the structure here of this particular entry here. This is the dwarf entry. And again, all of these ancestries are formatted in the same way. So all the entries begin by telling us the name of the ancestry. Okay, that's your major ancestry that you're a part of. And then it provides us with a small narrative that tells us something about dwarves as a whole. And it's more story time. It might reference what other people think of when they think of stereotypical dwarves, or it might reference the history of dwarves or something like that. And then we get into the actual text of the entry, and it tells us real narrative information about the actual history of the dwarves and about their current situation in the world. And remember that the default setting for this game is a world called Golarion, and so the information that is in this particular section right here, remember this is the narrative part, not the mechanical part, which means that your GM, if they're playing or running the game in a different setting, you might have different elements here, okay? This narrative information is telling us about what a dwarf is like in Golarion, okay? Each section has a little bit of a historic element to it, and then it tells us things that you would probably have a tendency to do or feel or behave like. That's what this you might section is. So for example, for dwarves, it's you might strive to uphold your personal honor, no matter the situation. Dwarves are very honorable. You can use one or all of these bullet points in order to help influence your decision on how to roleplay this PC. These are guidelines, they are suggestions, they are meant to help you with your imagination in terms of creating your character. They are by no means strict, adhered to ideas. They are the typical or prototypical or stereotypical idea of what a dwarf is in Golarion. Okay, now the next section here, others probably, this tells you about what the people of other ancestries probably think of when they see a prototypical dwarf. Others probably see you as stubborn, though whether they see that as an asset or a detriment changes from one person to the next, right? So dwarves are notoriously stubborn, and everyone else knows that, and so that's what people are going to know. Now, if you happen to be not a stubborn dwarf, you're playing against type. That's totally okay. This is really just for role-playing fodder. It's for imagination. It's for you determining how you want to play your PC. We haven't gotten to any rules bits here. There's no mechanics in here. Okay. Next, we get a slight, not very detailed physical description, but it does tell us something about dwarves. One of the things we learn at the end of this physical description category is how old dwarves typically get. And this tells us that a typical dwarf can live to be around 350 years old, and they reach a general age of maturity at around 25. Then we get to learn a little bit about tradition and ceremony, in that although they are technically probably considered adults at 25, it turns out that many of the more traditional clans, they really want you to go through a coming of age ceremony. And it's not necessary that that happens at 25. It might happen at 30, or it might happen at 22 or something like that. It completely depends entirely on the clan, but that's around the age that you are going to be considered an adult who can go make their own decision and do their own thing in Dwarven society. Speaking of Dwarven society, then we have a small section that describes for us the Dwarven society and how they interact with each other and different things about them. And this piece in here does have something that's interesting that I want to point out. Again, I'm not going to read all these the entirety of these entries to you, but I am pointing out that even though the majority of this is narrative, it tries to weave the narrative in a way that allows you to connect it with the actual mechanical bits that they are also showing you. Let me give you an example of that. The first example is, of course, the age. That you come of age at 25 and you might live 350 years. And so it's going to matter to you determining what age you're going to start adventuring. That what age, in other words, is your level 1 PC. So that matters to you. Even though that's not a strict mechanical thing that is happening. It's just narratively described. Here's another one. It says, few dwarves are seen without their clan dagger strapped to their belt. This dagger is forged just before the dwarf's birth and bears the gemstone of their clan. Now that tells us two things. Number one, someone in that clan, possibly the parents or grandparents or the elder in the clan, forges the clan dagger for the child that's about to be born. And that clan dagger has a gem in it that is a gemstone that represents that clan. So now we know that clans often have their interests and the clan itself represented by gems, by gemstones, a certain gemstone. And then it says, a parent uses this dagger to cut the infant's umbilical cord, making it the first weapon to taste their blood. In other words, there is some importance in the first sharp object tasting the blood of that infant being something that represents their inheritance and their membership in that clan. Okay? Now, again, this is all narrative. But when we do look at the rules information on this page, you see this down here. And you find that every dwarf is given a clan dagger as part of their character. It's given to them for free. They do not have to purchase it. It was given to them actually at birth. And then it tells you selling it is a terrible taboo. And that tells you something about the honor and the significance of that clan dagger. And a clan dagger is actually a weapon that is found on the weapons table in the equipment chapter. When we get there, we'll talk about it. And you get this one for free, and you definitely do not want to lose it or get rid of it. Okay? And then we have information about the alignment and religion of the typical or prototypical or stereotypical Dwarven society in Golarion, okay? And then we have some information about names. How do they normally form their names? Are names really formal or are they informal? Are they coming with titles or are they not worried about titles? Do they find long names sounding arrogant or do they find them very refined? You know, things like that. That's what it's going to tell you. And then it gives you some sample names. And that's the end, for the most part, of the narrative portion of this particular entry. Now we can look at the mechanical bits. And because of the layout of this book, if you don't want to have to read through and pull that mechanical bit out of a whole bunch of text, they luckily have formatted this so that it's very easy. If you look here on the right-hand side of the page, what you see is that it gives us the mechanical elements of the Dwarf Ancestry in a very clean, concise manner. It tells us there are 10 hit points. So your number of hit points come from your ancestry and your class choice, and possibly a couple of feat choices as you build your character. And that's what's going to determine your overall hit points. If you choose Dwarf as an ancestry, you will start with 10 hit points. You'll get more. You're going to have more by the time you start your adventuring career, but that's what your baseline starting point is. It also tells you you're a medium-sized creature. That's for the purposes of game mechanics. It doesn't actually tell you how tall you are, or how short you are, or how wide you are, or how skinny you are. It's telling you just for game mechanic purposes, you are a medium-sized creature. Your speed is 20 feet. That is the maximum movement that you can take in a single stride action. Okay, your ability boosts, that is, the abilities that you have that are going to get a +2 to them, are Constitution and Wisdom, and then another one of your choice. That is not Constitution or Wisdom. And your ability flaw is Charisma. That is, your Charisma is going to go down by 2 points. Now, if you decide you want to be a charismatic dwarf, you can add points to that particular attribute later in the rest of the, at different points in the rest of the character building process. The languages that you have to start with are Common and Dwarven, and then if you end up with an intelligence modifier, that is a modifier, if your intelligence is high enough at the end of character creation for you to have a positive modifier, then you can choose a number of extra languages equal to that modifier, and you can choose from Gnomish, Goblin, Jotun, Orcish, Terran, or Undercommon, or any other language that the GM sees as relevant to your upbringing or your society or the setting that you're in. You are given the traits Dwarf and Humanoid. Again, these are keywords that are going to tell you whether an effect possibly affects you or skips you. Dwarves all also have dark vision. That means you can see in darkness and dim light just as well as you can see in bright light, though your vision in darkness is in black and white. So as a biologist, I take exception to the way this is worded, because when you see in bright light, you do see in color, and dwarves presumably see in color. Okay, and seeing in darkness and dim light is not just as well as in bright light if you're not seeing color. Color helps us have high resolution vision. It helps us see better. Having bright enough light to see color means that our eyes are working to give us more visual acuity, which means that if it is dim light or darkness, even though you can see, you're not completely blind and you're not in a pitch black area, you're still not seeing just as well. So that's just my little nitpick thing as a biologist. I nitpick that. But I get the idea that they're going for. Now, we will talk about dark vision as well as low light vision, which you're going to see in the next couple of entries. Those ancestries give low light vision instead of dark vision. And so we're going to talk about those differences when we get to that point. But just understand that this is something that is a mechanical benefit that is given to dwarves because of their narrative history, that is their ancestral history that tells us that they live in dark places under mountains. Okay? And then, of course, the clan dagger that I mentioned before. Now that those mechanical bits are out of the way, let's talk about the heritages. Every ancestry has a number of heritages that you're going to choose from, and each heritage will give you some sort of benefit to your character. And because you can only choose one heritage, and it's the heritage that you keep for the rest of your adventuring career, that means that you can have two players that create dwarves that have different heritages that end up with different abilities and ways of being. Okay, so you can create two dwarves who are completely different, well, maybe not completely different, are very different in their role-playing and in their abilities because of different heritages. Okay, so it's an interesting idea to say, yes, they're both dwarves, but they have different heritages. So if we were to look at these, what you're going to find is each of these has a particular mechanical benefit that it will provide for you. So for example, the Ancient Blooded Dwarf, the mechanical benefit it provides is that it provides you or gives you this action. And this action is called Calling on Ancient Blood. And it's a reaction, you can tell from this swoopy signal. And that means there is a trigger. And for every reaction has to have a particular trigger. And the trigger is you are asked to make a saving throw against a magical effect, but you didn't roll yet. But you now are it's in that moment between you being told by the GM, make me a saving throw, and you picking up the die and rolling. You can decide, hey, you know what? I'm going to use this reaction. I'm a dwarf, and I'm going to call on the ancient blood of my ancestors, and it's going to provide me with a +1 bonus to my saving throw that I'm rolling. Okay, and that is a +1 circumstance bonus. There are 4 types of bonuses that you can get in Pathfinder 2. Circumstance bonuses do not stack with each other, but if you had a circumstance bonus and a status bonus or an item bonus, those would all stack together. But if you have 2 circumstance bonuses, they will not stack. We'll talk about stacking and bonuses and where they come from at a different time. But understand that this is going to give you a +1 to your save. Now, why does that make a difference? Remember in the Chapter 1 video that I did, if you happen to watch it, you'll know that I talked about the 4-tiered resolution system. And that is the fact that when you roll any check or save, you can not just succeed or fail, but you might critically succeed or you could possibly critically fail. And because critical success only means that you get 10 more than the target number, it's not just a 20 on a 20-sided die, in other words, it's getting 10 more. Having a +1 to that roll actually means you have a better chance of critically succeeding than you did before. And the thing is that sometimes in saves, when you critically succeed, you end up not having the effect at all. You've probably heard of the concept of saving for half. Right? If you get hit with a fireball, you might make a saving throw, a dexterity saving throw, and if you succeed, you only take half damage instead of full damage. Well, if you critically succeed in some cases, in Pathfinder 2, if you critically succeed, you don't just save for half, you don't take anything. You avoid it all. So getting a critical success on a save is actually a really good thing. So getting an automatic +1 circumstance bonus, that's pretty good. So in other words, don't poo-poo the +1 bonuses, because in Pathfinder 2, +1 bonuses are really helpful depending on the situation. And that is what an Ancient Blooded Dwarf would get. The Death Warden Dwarf gets a very similar effect in that they get an automatic moving up of tier if they save against a necromantic effect. So if they're saving, then they roll a success, that automatically gets bumped up to a critical success. But it's any success gets bumped up to that critical success. So again, it makes it easier for you to avoid necromantic effects, okay? So calling on Ancient Blood, that would be magical effects. Death Warden Dwarf, they get a bonus to necromantic effects. Forge Dwarf gets a bonus of fire resistance, and environmental effects that have to do with heat affect them less than other PCs. Resistance in Pathfinder 2, just real briefly, because a lot of the different ancestries have something that provides them with resistance. Resistance is followed by a number. In this case, fire resistance equal to half your level, but with a minimum of 1, okay? And so if you are level 6, half your level is 3, so you would have fire resistance 3. And that means that anytime you get hit with fire damage, you ignore 3 points of that damage, okay? And so that's what resistance means. And so that's a pretty good benefit because you have it from day 1, okay? And it improves as your level improves. If you're level 20, you have fire resistance 10. That means you get hit with fire for 15 points of damage, you just ignore 10 of it, okay? 2 other heritages, Rock Dwarf, which gives you a circumstance bonus to fortitude or reflex attempts to shove or trip you. And so basically when something tries to shove or trip you, it has to roll against your fortitude and reflex DC, and you get a +2. So they have to roll 2 higher to even affect you. In other words, it's very hard to move you. And strong-blooded dwarves, they are able to recover, they are able to resist and recover from afflictions like poisoning very much easier. And diseases and poisoning and sickness, the way that they happen in Pathfinder 2, they have certain levels, and when you attempt to save, if you fail to save, the disease or the affliction gets worse, and if you succeed, it gets better by 1 step. So if you are poison 3, you have to succeed several times to get down to poison 0 until you're actually fully healed. But if you are a strong-blooded dwarf, the benefit this gives you is that if you critically succeed, you get rid of 3 of those levels. If you succeed, you get rid of 2 instead of 1. So you have to make fewer saves to get healthy from that particular effect than an individual from another ancestry. Okay. Again, I don't want to go over every single one in every ancestry, and I'm not, but I'm trying to show you sort of the format and the layout of these. After this, we're going to get to feats. And so just really quickly, how you read these feats, it tells us we're going to have a list of first level feats here. It tells us the name. This one's called Dwarven Lore. It tells us what level it is, feat 1. That means that you can take the feat at level 1 or higher. So if you are at level 5, you could actually take a level 1 feat. If you're at level 7, you could take a level 1 feat, okay? If you're at level 1, you cannot take a level 5 feat, okay? Because you're not high enough level yet. And each of these is going to provide some sort of benefit. This one gives a couple of ranks in a couple of different lores, plus you get Dwarven lore. This one gives you some weapon familiarity with specific weapons that are related to your ancestry. You're going to find that all the ancestries have a weapon familiarity feat, okay, that lets you get trained with the weapons that are inherent to your particular ancestry, and it makes it so that your weapons that would normally be considered advanced are actually now within the realm of you learning at a very high proficiency level. We'll talk about that when we get to the classes, because classes are going to provide you with proficiencies with certain weapons, and if you were to take this feat, the fact that your advanced dwarf weapons are stepped down into being in the martial category means that you can more easily master those. That's basically what that means, okay? Now, if you're not going to choose a martial class, that won't affect you as much, and you're probably also not taking this feat. So that's fine. Another one is Rock Runner, which reduces the effect of difficult terrain if you're a dwarf. That is difficult terrain caused by earth and rock. Stone Cutting gives you a bonus to your perception checks for looking for stone-related or rock-related faults in a particular structure. Unburdened Iron makes it so that you are not burdened by the weight and heftiness and bulk of armor, so your speed penalty is reduced. When other individuals who are wearing very heavy armor would have their speed reduced, you would not have yours reduced as much, which is good because as a dwarf you're not as fast in the first place. And then Vengeful Hatred allows you to choose a sort of designated foe, and it gives you a sort of suggested list, and it says, well, this is an ancestral hatred that you have, that all of your people hate this particular type of creature, and so when you fight them, you actually get a bonus to your damage because of your inherent hatred for them, your innate hatred that you have. Also, what it really does, and the real benefit here, is even if you're being attacked by a creature that's not your vengeful hatred target, okay, that is, if you chose Drow as your vengeful hatred target, if you get attacked by something that's not a Drow and it critically succeeds, it hits you with a critical success and it deals damage, you actually will get your vengeful hatred temporarily placed onto that individual. So you get a temporary vengeful hatred to anyone that critically hits you. Okay, so that's kind of a bonus. It's, in other words, even if you're choosing a particular type of creature, it's not necessarily that you have to make sure you're in a campaign where you only fight those type of creatures. Otherwise, this is worthless, because it actually does activate anytime you get a critical hit. Next, you get to 5th level feats. Remember, you're going to get an ancestry feat at 1st level, and then 4 levels go by before you get another ancestry feat. What you also notice is there's more than one 1st level ancestry feat, and there's more than one 5th level ancestry feats. There's Boulder Roll, and then there's Dwarven Weapon Cunning, but now you notice there's only 2. And both of these have a prerequisite. So this feat right here, for example, let me translate this for you. This says there is a feat that is a 5th level feat, which means you have to be at least 5th level to take it, and it is called Boulder Roll, and it has the trait of Dwarf, which means if you cannot access Dwarven Ancestry feats, and you don't have the Dwarf trait, then you cannot get this particular feat. And then it has this little symbol next to Boulder Roll that has 2 boxes. Right? This means 2 actions. This is a 2-action activity. And then it shows you under the trait of Dwarf, it shows you there is a prerequisite. The prerequisite for this feat is that you already have to have the Rock Runner feat. Rock Runner is a 1st level feat for dwarves. If you chose to take a different feat at 1st level, you cannot take this Boulder Roll feat at 5th level. However, what you could do is, if you decide, oh, I really like the Boulder Roll idea, I want that feat, you can choose to take Rock Runner as your 5th level feat, and then at 9th level, when you get another Ancestry feat, now you take Boulder Roll. And so, in other words, it's okay that there's only 2 feats at 5th level, because several of these 1st level feats are very good, and you might want to take them instead of Boulder Roll or Dwarven Weapon Cunning. Because if you didn't take Rock Runner, you cannot take Boulder Roll, and if you didn't take Dwarven Weapon Familiarity, you cannot take Dwarven Weapon Cunning. So if you are a dwarf and you took Vengeful Hatred, you can't take either of the 5th level feats that are on offer in the core rulebook for dwarves. But what you can do is take another 1st level feat. Okay, so it's not supremely wonderful. It would be great if they had a bunch of 5th level feats that everybody could choose from, but that's not how it is. And in fact, it's actually better to have fewer choices, and the 1st level feats are pretty good. Then at 9th level, we have a couple of feats. Neither one of them have a prerequisite, so as long as you're 9th level, you could take either one of these. They're going to give you different abilities. The mountain stoutness makes it so that it's easier for you to recover from the dying condition. That is, if you get knocked down to 0 or fewer hit points, then your recovery from that is easier. Also, if you take the toughness feat, you can actually combine this effect and you can reduce the DC even more for the recovery check after you've been knocked down. And then Stonewalker is going to give you the ability to innately cast Meld into Stone, which is a 3rd level divine spell. Okay, and you can cast that as a dwarf just inherently. Okay, and then at 13th level, the feat that you get access to is Dwarven Weapon Expertise. Now, in order to take this, you had to take Dwarven Weapon Familiarity at 1st level, or at one of the previous levels, you had to have picked up Dwarven Weapon Familiarity. That's because Dwarven Weapon Expertise just actually steps you up one more step in terms of your training for those weapons, and also for the Dwarven weapons. And so that's really great, but what if you're not a fighter type? What if you're a wizard or a cleric and you didn't take Dwarven Weapon Familiarity or Dwarven Weapon Cunning, and now you can't take Dwarven Weapon Expertise? Well, you just simply take a lower level feat. Okay? And there are no 17th level feats for this ancestry. So at 17th level, when you get another choice for a feat, then you can take one of the other ones as long as you have the prerequisites. So if at 13th level, you finally went back and took Dwarven Weapon Familiarity, when you get to 17th level, you can actually take Dwarven Weapon Expertise, because its prerequisite is Dwarven Weapon Familiarity. Now, I feel like I've spent a lot of time on this, but what you're going to see is a lot of these things are very similar in the different ancestries. You're going to find an Elven Weapon Expertise type feat in the Elf Ancestry category. You're going to find Elven Weapon Familiarity in the Elven category, and you're going to find some feats that have a prerequisite such that if you didn't take it at 1st level, you can't take it at 5th level, and that sort of thing. That format stays the same. Before I go to the next ancestry, I do want to say one more thing about these entries in the ancestry section. And that is that at the end of each of the entries on this right-hand side sidebar, they tell you a little bit about adventurers, and what they're telling us is a couple of things. Again, this is more narrative. This is by no means a stricture or a rule that says you have to take these backgrounds or you have to choose these classes. It's just telling you suggested typical classes and backgrounds that are going to be used by individuals with this ancestry. So, for example, it says Dwarven adventurers tend to work as treasure hunters or sellswords. That is, they can be mercenaries. They often leave their citadels and subterranean cities in search of wealth, to enrich their homeland, or to reclaim long-lost dwarven treasures or lands taken by the enemies of their kin. In other words, they might have a vendetta against a certain particular empire or a certain type of creature that they are trying to reclaim some of their dwarven treasures or whatnot. And so that's a very typical motivation. That is not a mechanical rules bit. It's just a suggested way to think about, well, if my dwarf is comfortable in his home society, why would he leave and go out and adventure? Well, those are your reasons why. And then it gives us some suggested backgrounds and classes. Typical dwarven backgrounds include acolyte, artisan, merchant, miner, and warrior. That doesn't mean you have to take one of those 5 backgrounds. It just means that if you really don't have any idea where to go or what you should do, those are good suggestions for a dwarf person, okay? Then it says dwarves excel at many of the martial classes, such as barbarian, fighter, monk, and ranger. They also make excellent clerics and druids. So it's giving you class suggestions. Again, not a rule. It's not telling you you can only be one of those. It just says, by way of suggestion, here's what their ancestry sort of lends itself to, okay? And you're going to find this same format and structure in each of these ancestries. So I'm not going to read all of these to you. I'm just going to go through now, and I'm going to point out some very interesting things about some of these ancestries. I'm not going to point out that the format is the same, because it is the same. It gives us the narrative, it gives us the actual in-text explanation, it's going to tell us how you might think and feel and reason things if you were an elf, and then it's going to tell us what other individuals probably think about when they think about elves. It's going to give us a physical description, it's going to tell us about the society and the naming, all that stuff. I'm not going to go through each of those for every single one of these, okay? I am going to point out a couple of things that are really interesting, though. One of the things that's interesting about elves is that because they are so long-lived, and in Pathfinder 2 they can live up to about 600 years, because they are so long-lived, some of them spend a lot of time around shorter-lived ancestries, that is, people of shorter-lived ancestries, and they start getting a more morose outlook on the world, and they start having a watchful sort of ideal where they are tired of losing their comrades, because everyone that they end up developing deep relationship with die. And these elves get very morose because they watch generation after generation after generation of their friends and people they consider family dying because they're such short-lived peoples, and these elves are called the Forlorn. Now, this kind of background was also true in Pathfinder 1, they just didn't really give it that name, at least in the core book. And so the Forlorn is kind of this group of elves that are really affected by, or at least were affected by, the passing of their friends who were of ancestries that are much shorter lived. I find that really, really interesting. I think it's a really cool little element that lets you get an idea of their psyche. Okay, and you're going to see that there is actually a heritage and or a feat, I can't remember which one right now at this second, that is going to actually play on that particular element of the sort of society of elves dealing with shorter-lived races. Okay, then we get a description. It notes that they are sort of fragile-looking and maybe graceful. Okay, and then we learn that they are adults at age 20, and although adults at age 20, but really the fully emotional maturity comes after 100 years. That's what it says, right? So even though physically they might be an adult at 20, much like humans actually in the real world, they're not quite fully cooked until they hit a much higher age. And then they can live to around 600 years. And then we get about their society and their typical alignments and their naming conventions and all of that. And now let's look at the rules bits. They get 6 hit points. They are medium size. Their speed is 30 feet. That's bigger than dwarves, or higher than dwarves, right? Their ability boosts are to dexterity and intelligence, and then a free third one. Their ability flaw is to constitution, which kind of goes with their sort of fragile seeming frame, okay? They start with common and elven and as languages, and then of course if they have an intelligence modifier, if you have an intelligence modifier, you will choose from Celestial, Draconic, Gnoll, Gnomish, Goblin, Orcish, or Sylvan, or any other language that your GM deems appropriate for your particular campaign. You get the traits Elf and Humanoid, and you have low light vision. You can see in dim light as though it were bright light, so you ignore the concealed condition due to dim light, because you can see as if it is not dim light. So something that was using shadows to hide in dim light is not concealed to you. Okay? Elven possible heritage, there's an Arctic elf, which is very similar to the Forged Dwarf, the one that has the heat resistance, except in this case, the Arctic elf has resistance to cold, and the cold environment doesn't affect them as well. Being a Cavern elf means that you get dark vision, okay? Being a Seer elf means that you can cast Detect Magic innately, okay? Even if you're not a wizard or something, you just have innate magic within you that allows you to detect magic. You also get a +1 circumstance bonus to identifying magic and deciphering magical writings, okay? Whisper elves have a really, really keen sense of hearing, so it's hard to hide from them, and they can actually seek things just by using their auditory sensations, okay? And woodland elves are able to climb and thrive in a woody environment better than any other type of elf. And you can see that there are some other rules bits in here. For example, you can always use the take cover action when you are within forest terrain to gain cover, even if you're not next to an obstacle that you can take cover behind. So take cover here is capitalized because taking cover is a specific action that you can attempt in the Pathfinder 2 game. And taking cover means that you see something you could possibly hide behind and you dive behind it so that you can be hidden, physically speaking, from anyone trying to find you. An elf can take cover behind nothing in the forest. They blend in that well if you're a woodland elf. Okay, that's the idea there, along with some other climbing abilities. All right, ancestry feats. You have this very interesting ancestral longevity one that allows you to actually use your long years as a way to gain temporary trained proficiency in certain skills that you are not already trained in. And remember, in Pathfinder 2, you have 5 levels of skill training. You can be untrained, in which case you get no bonuses and you don't add your level. You can be trained, where you get a +2 plus your level. You can be an expert, where you get a +4 plus your level. You can be a master, where you're +6 plus your level, or you can be legendary at that particular skill, where you get a +8 plus your level. And because you add your level as you level up, of course, you get better and better at those. But if you're untrained, you don't add your level. What this feat does is it makes it so that you can temporarily consider yourself trained. Temporarily, that is for one day. You can consider yourself trained in a particular skill that you were untrained in. Okay, Elven lore, very similar to Dwarven lore. It gives you a couple of skills, and it gives you Elven lore as a particular trained skill. Elven weapon familiarity. Remember, I mentioned you're going to see that weapon familiarity a lot. The weapons that elves use are longbows, composite longbows, longswords, rapiers, shortbows, and composite shortbows. That's very different from the dwarves, in which case it was hammers and warhammers and pikes, right? Forlorn, here's the feat I was talking about earlier. Watching your friends age and die fills you with moroseness that protects you against harmful emotions. You gain a +1 circumstance bonus to saving throws against emotion effects. If you roll a success on a saving throw against emotion effect, you get a critical success instead. Now, here's the thing about that. What is an emotion effect? Well, some spells have emotion as a trait. That means they affect the emotional state and the emotional mind of the individual that they are targeting. And so they'll have emotion as a trait, just like this has elf as a trait. And so, for example, there's a fear effect, there's a dread aura effect spell, I think is a focus spell, that actually causes dread. Well, that plays on your emotions. Well, if somebody was trying to cast that on you, and you are an elf that took the Forlorn feat, well, you have a particular aloofness, and you have steeled yourself against changes to your emotions based on pain or memories or ideas of your comrades from the past times. And so you get a +1 circumstance bonus to the trying to fight off that effect. Okay, very neat. It fits right in. It's very sort of evocative in terms of role-playing opportunities. Instead of just being a mechanical piece, it actually has meaning within the ancestry. Okay. Nimble Elf increases your speed by 5. Okay, I'm not going to read all of these, but you can see that there are several level 1 feats. Then we get to level 5. Ageless Patience gives you some extra ability for your perception checks, okay? Elven Weapon Elegance, you had to take Elven Weapon Familiarity first. So again, here we are at a case where there's only 2 level 5 feats, and one of them has a prerequisite such that if you didn't take Familiarity in the first level, then you can't take this one at 5th level, but you could take Familiarity now, and then take this one at 9th level when you get your next feat. Elf Step makes it so that you can step twice, so 5-foot step twice. The stride action lets you move up to your speed distance. The step action lets you move 5 feet, but doesn't provoke attacks of opportunity. In this case, an elf with elf step. Notice this is an action. It's a 1 action activity. So this 1 action could be used instead of just taking a 5-foot step. You now take 2 5-foot steps. Okay. Expert Longevity means that it has a prerequisite. You had to take Ancestral Longevity. It actually adds to and enhances that particular interesting idea of becoming trained temporarily in something that you were untrained in. Universal Longevity, 13th level feat. You had to have Expert Longevity first. This has a frequency of once per day, and it basically plays off of this Expert Longevity and allows you to retrain some of your skills. If you decide, hey, I've been using Ancestral Longevity a ton of times to feel trained in this particular skill, and now I want to retrain one of my other skills into this one. Universal Longevity allows you to do that. And then, of course, Elven Weapon Expertise. Again, it plays off of that familiarity, that weapon familiarity thing. Elven Adventurers. Many elves adventure to find beauty and discover new things. Typical backgrounds for an elf include emissary, hunter, noble, scholar, or scout. Notice those are different from what it suggested for the dwarves. Often, elves become rangers or rogues, taking advantage of their dexterity, or they become alchemists or wizard, which satisfies a little bit of their intellectual curiosity. So here's your suggested backgrounds and classes for the elf. Again, not a stricture. It doesn't tell you have to choose them from there, but that is these suggestions based on the way the ancestry is built. And that's the end of the elf section. So now I'm going to actually accelerate and go even faster. Now we get to gnomes, and you'll see that gnomes have a very similar format. And one of the really cool, interesting things about gnomes is that it is said that they come directly from the first world. And the first world is really the land of Fae, the realm of Fae. Okay, and because they are not from here, and they have been sort of, their connection to the land of Fae has been severed, they have this very eccentric idea about life. And because they have been separated from the magic of the first world, they start going through a process called bleaching when they are not doing enough innovative, dreaming, eccentric types of activities. If they're not learning something or doing something new, or moving around and learning new things, or focusing on something for a short time and then changing, if they don't do that, they start becoming they start suffering from the bleaching. And the bleaching is where they literally start turning white, their hair starts turning white, all their skin starts turning white, and they start losing their will to live. And eventually, many of them will die of the bleaching. Okay? That's really interesting. It tells you more about it in this entry. Then we get to the point where we get the mechanics bits. They get 8 hit points. They are a small size. Here's the first small size ancestry. Their speed is 25 feet. They get 3 ability boosts, just like the other 2 that we've talked about, Constitution and Charisma, and a free one. Their ability flaw is Strength because they are so small. They get Common, Gnomish, and Sylvan languages, just like the other ancestries. They're going to get a number of extra languages based on their intelligence modifier. They are gnomes and humanoids, so they get those 2 traits, and they, like the elves, get low light vision. The gnome heritages are Chameleon Gnome, which can change their appearance very quickly. The Fey-touched Gnome, which allows them to cast a spell innately, a primal spell innately, because they still retain some of that connection to the first world or the Fey land. Sensate Gnomes are very similar to, they get an ability very similar to the hearing, the special, extra sensitive hearing of elves, except in this case it's not extra special hearing, it's extra special sense of smell. And so it's written a little weird because it talks about the range of your scent, and it doesn't mean the scent you're giving off, it means how well you can smell. Umbral gnomes are basically, they have ancestry that are very similar to Svirfneblin or deep gnomes. Wellspring gnomes are gnomes that are also very connected to the magic of the world, except in this case, it's not the primal magic of the Fey lineage. It is actually magic of the other 3 traditions, or one of the other 3 traditions. And remember, the 4 traditions of magic in Pathfinder 2 are primal, occult, arcane, and divine. Feats. Animal Accomplice lets the gnome build a rapport with an animal and basically get a familiar. So even if you're not a magic casting creature, because you are basically a Fey-derived creature, you can befriend animals very easily, and you get a familiar that is bonded to you. Burrow Elocutionist means you can speak to burrowing animals and actually have communication with them, and they can tell you things. Fey Fellowship gives you circumstance bonuses to perception and to making an impression with Fey individuals, or individuals from the first world, or who have first world ancestry. First world magic is going to give you a primal innate spell. Gnome Obsession lets you pick a lore skill, and that will progress very quickly throughout your character progression into being legendary. Okay. Again, here's weapon familiarity. In this case, it's gnomes, and gnomes like circular blades or curved blades and peculiar weird shaped blades. And so they are skilled with, or become trained in, glaive and kukri. Illusion sense makes it so that you have a very easy time seeing through illusions. 5th level, the Animal Elocutionist. Actually, if you had burrowing animals that you could talk to, now you could talk to any animal. Okay, you had to take Burrow Elocutionist first. Energized Font provides you with a one action activity that actually once per day allows you to increase your focus points. So you gain a focus point. You get to regain a focus point that might have been spent. Now, focus points are special points that you get if you are a caster. You get focus points to spend on specific specialized spells that you have called your focus spells, and you can only ever have a maximum of 3 focus points at a given time. And once you've spent some of those, getting the ability to get one back might be really good. Okay. And so that's a 5th level feat, and that's what it does for you. And it's a one action to do that, and you can do it once per day. Gnome Weapon Innovator is just your next step of Gnome Weapon Familiarity. And First World Adept gives you stronger magic. You get a couple of second level innate spells that you can cast, right? And Vivacious Conduit means that you can heal yourself. That's very similar to the Dwarven Ancestry healing feat that was at 9th level, okay? Gnome Weapon Expertise, of course, is your 13th level feat that is related to that Gnome Weapon Familiarity. And so you see how these start to look very similar and familiar, because a lot of them play on the same motif. All of them have the Weapon Familiarity, and so there's 3 levels of that. All of them have, or several of them have, one that allows, heritage that allows for cold or heat resistance. Many of the feats will allow you to do something and then build on it at a later time. Okay, and so these ancestry feats allow you to become more and more like the ancestry that you are. So you become more and more like a gnome as you become higher and higher level your PC. And then when we get to the end of the gnome section, we get the other little piece of advice about gnome adventures. It says, adventure is not so much a choice as a necessity for most gnomes because of the bleaching, right? Adventuring gnomes often claim mementos, allowing them to remember and relive their most exciting stories. Gnomes often consider the entertainer, merchant, or nomad backgrounds. In addition, the animal whisperer, barkeep, gambler, and tinker backgrounds are particularly appropriate. Anything that lets them tinker around is really good. This is sort of where that whole tinker gnome trope comes from, except in this case, it's not so much a tinker gnome as just someone that's continuously learning about something new so that they don't get bored and start becoming victims of the bleaching. Now, their connection to magic makes spellcasting classes particularly thematic, and so therefore primal innate spells, classes that have primal innate spells such as druids or primal sorcerers, if you choose a Wellspring gnome, that is particularly helpful because you can choose a different actual spellcasting tradition, okay? And so there's your suggestions there. Next, we have goblins. It tells us the very interesting, unique history of goblins and how they amuse themselves and how they have sort of chaotically wound their way into the rest of the other societies and how they survive that way. It's a very interesting entry into the sort of standard races list that we get. And they start with, mechanically speaking, 6 hit points. They're small-sized creatures. They have a speed of 25. Their ability boosts are in dexterity, so they're very fast. And charisma. They are very winning. They win you over. They are, even though they're chaotic little balls of fire-loving weirdness, they actually sing and taunt and play pranks, and they have fun, and they generally keep things light, okay? And then a free ability boost. Their ability flaw is in wisdom because they are a very, number one, short-lived race, but also they haven't really, they don't really have a very extreme structure, so they don't have a lot of long-lived history to provide them with the sort of the wisdom of, I know when that decision is going to have a bad outcome, right? They don't have that. So their ability flaw is wisdom. They speak Common and Goblin, and just like every other ancestry, they will get languages that are based on their intelligence modifier. The goblin heritages really go with the theming of goblins. You've got Charhide goblins, which is basically the fire-resistant heritage of goblins. Works the same exact way. In first, the resistance works the same way as, for example, the dwarven one. However, they also are able to recover from persistent fire damage much easier. And what does that mean? Well, if you have persistent damage being applied to you, you have to make a check, a flat check, and so you have to roll a d20 and roll over a certain number. Usually it's 15. In the case of a goblin, if you're a Charhide goblin, you only have to roll over a 10 to put your fire out. Okay, Iron Gut goblins can pretty much eat anything and not get sick. That's kind of the idea there. Razor Tooth goblins, the goblin teeth, one of the things it tells us in the narrative portion of the background is that they have teeth that constantly fall out and regrow. And so in this case, the Razor Tooth goblin, they can use those as weapons, so they get basically a jaw attack or a bite attack. Snow goblins are able to withstand cold, and some of them grow fur, so they tend to be blue and grow fur, so they don't really look like your typical goblin, but very cool. Very nice thematic thing. They have resistance to cold, and the cold environment doesn't affect them as badly as it does other creatures. And then Unbreakable Goblin, it has this very interesting thing where it says, well, you have an exceptionally thick skull, and your bones have an extra cartilage in them, so if you, first of all, you get 10 hit points instead of 6 from your ancestry, and when you fall, it's as if you fell from half that distance. So if you fall 20 feet, you actually only count it as if you had fallen from 10 because it's harder to hurt you because your bones are more springy, so to speak. Their ancestry feats are also very flavorful. Burn It means that you can add some sort of fire damage to some of the things that you can do, whether it's making an alchemical item or casting a spell. City Scavenger means that you can subsist on scraps, and you can also find junk in those scraps and maybe make money off of it during downtime. Goblin Lore is very much like the Dwarven or Elven Lore feats that you had that give you a couple skills, and then they give you the Goblin Lore skill. Goblin Scuttle is actually a feat that gives you a power. It is a reaction power, and the trigger is that an ally ends their move next to you, and it allows you to actually take a step. And as I mentioned before, step means a 5-foot change in action, and it allows you maybe to flank, and so that can put you in better position. Goblin Song, another feat that gives you an action. It gives you a 1-action activity, and that is that you can try to annoy individuals that are in combat with you by singing to them, and if you critically succeed, they actually take a status penalty to their perception checks and will saves for a certain amount of time. Goblin Weapon Familiarity, something that you should see as very familiar by now. Junk Tinker is one where, along with that subsistence thing from the City Scavenger, you're also finding junk, and now you're building stuff out of it. Rough Rider means even though most goblins don't like to ride other larger animals, you actually have the ability to make nature checks and command either a goblin dog or a wolf if you're going to ride it. Very Sneaky allows you to move farther with your sneak action. Often when you do the sneak action, you are limited in how far you can move. Goblins, if they are sneaky and have the very sneaky feat, can actually move farther than a lot of other creatures who are trying to sneak. 5th level, there's only one 5th level feat, Goblin Weapon Frenzy. This is just your second version of the Goblin Weapon Familiarity. 9th level, Cave Climber gives you a climb speed. Skittering Scuttle is the sort of better version of Goblin Scuttle. You had to take Goblin Scuttle first, so it has a prerequisite, and this lets you stride up to half your speed instead of just taking a step once an ally has moved near you. So now you can really move around and put yourself in the best possible positioning. And then the 13th level, there's actually two 13th level feats here. One of them is the Goblin Weapon Expertise, also attached to that Goblin Weapon Familiarity. This should not surprise you at all. And then Very, Very Sneaky, which is just a sort of higher level, more powerful, Very Sneaky, which lets you move up to your speed while you're sneaking rather than being so limited. Okay, and so now when we get to the end here and we have the Goblin Adventurers section, it tells us to some degree almost every goblin is an adventurer, surviving life on the edge using skill and wits. Goblins explore and hunt for treasures by nature, though some become true adventurers in their own right, often after being separated from their group or tribe. Goblins often have the acrobat, criminal, entertainer, gladiator, hunter, and street urchin backgrounds. Okay, consider playing an alchemist, since many goblins love fire, or perhaps a bard, since goblins love songs. They are scrappy survivors, and they're often rogues who dart about in the shadows, although their inherently charismatic nature also draws them to the pursuit of magical classes, such as a sorcerer. Because of their low wisdom, you notice cleric is not mentioned, okay? And then that moves us to the second to last heritage, which is Halfling. Again, structured the exact same way. It tells us all about them. It gives us some narrative juice there. It gives us some ideas for how you might perceive of this character, how others might perceive of this character. It gives us a physical description. It tells us about age. Okay, it tells us about their society, their alignment, and their names. And then we learn that they get 6 hit points. They are small size. They have a speed of 25 feet. They get 3 ability boosts, dexterity, wisdom, and a free choice. Their ability flaw is strength, kind of like the gnomes, and they have common and halfling, and again, they get to add languages based on their intelligence modifier. Their traits are halfling and humanoid, and they have a particular ability called Keen Eyes that says your eyes are very sharp. It allows you to make out small details about concealed or even invisible creatures that others would just miss. You gain a +2 circumstance bonus when using the seek action to find hidden or undetected creatures within 30 feet of you. The seek action is an action that you would use the perception skill to perform. When you target an opponent that is concealed from you or hidden from you, you reduce the DC of the flat check to 3 for a concealed target or 9 for a hidden one. That's a really huge reduction. It makes it so that you can much more easily find things that are hidden because you actually look and you see a little bit better than everyone else. Okay, so this is sort of akin to the elves can hear really well, right? And the gnomes can smell. They have a sense of smell that's really, really attuned. And now we find out that the halflings have really good eyesight. Okay. The heritages for halflings are gutsy, that allows them to have a really high chance of getting a critical success on any saving throw against an emotion effect. The hillock halfling, they live in the hills. This allows you to relax very well and enjoy the finer things in life, and that means that when you regain hit points overnight, you add your level to the hit points that you gain, which means that you heal very easily, okay? And if someone uses medicine to treat your wounds, if you eat a snack, whether it's a little granola bar or whether it's an entire meal, that actually adds your level to the hit points that you regain from that treatment. So in other words, you heal really quickly as long as you're relaxed and happy. Nomadic halflings, your ancestors traveled, you gain 2 additional languages from among the common and uncommon languages available to you, and every time, if you take the multilingual feat, every time you take it, you gain another new language. Now, this is one of those where this is great in the right campaign, but otherwise, I think most people would call this basically worthless. Unless you're playing a campaign where you're traveling to a wide range of areas and your DM enforces the idea of there being no real common language, that you have to be able to learn and speak, and to be able to communicate with those peoples, you have to actually speak their language. If your GM is going to do that for you and make that the case and tells you ahead of time, this is a great ancestry heritage. Otherwise, and I will say the same thing about the multilingual feat. And the reason I say this is because in all of my years of GMing games and playing in games and running games, most of the time, having a different language doesn't matter, right? It does not really matter. It only matters in the slightest, who speaks Goblin, or does anybody speak Dwarven, and then fine. And if the answer is no, you find another way to communicate. You either cast a spell, or you find a way that you can write something in a third shared language. You do something, right? But it's not that big a deal, because having a language barrier actually slows the game down, and most people are playing and want to have fast-paced action, okay? Anyway, now that I've gone off on that tangent, Twilight Halfling. Your ancestors performed many secret acts under the concealing cover of dusk, either for good or ill, and over time you develop the ability to see in twilight, so you get low light vision. So it's a way to give you vision in dim light that is just as good as vision in bright light. Wildwood halflings live in the jungle or forest, and so they can ignore difficult terrain from different kind of forest obstacles, basically. The ancestry feats here, distracting shadows. You can remain hidden using larger folks, larger creatures, and avoid drawing attention to yourself. So you get a bonus. Basically, you can use a creature to hide behind, but normally you cannot. You can take cover, right, and take cover behind another creature when normally you cannot. Halfling lore, very similar to the Dwarven lore and the Elven lore, so it gives you a couple of skills along with Halfling lore. Halfling luck is an actual free action once per day. Once per day, if you fail a skill check or a saving throw, you can just attempt it again. You have to take the second roll no matter how good or bad it is, but you can attempt it again. Again, Halfling weapon familiarity. Again, okay, you've seen the weapon familiarity feats a lot now. Halflings prefer slings, the sling staffs, and short swords. You get the idea. Sure feat makes it so that you roll a success on an acrobatics check to balance, and or an athletics to climb. You get a critical success instead of just a regular success. Not a problem. Also, you're not flat-footed when you attempt to balance or climb. Most creatures, if they're balancing or trying to climb, they become flat-footed because they're trying to focus on balancing themselves and not fall down. You don't do that. Okay. Titan Slinger means that when you are trying to use your sling against a large creature or a larger one than that, then you increase the size of your weapon damage die. So if it did a D4, it's now going to do a D6. If it did a D6, it's now going to do a D8. Okay. Unfettered Halfling, you were once forced into service as a laborer, either pressed into indentured servitude or shackled by the evils of slavery, but you've since escaped and have trained to ensure you'll never be caught again. Whenever you roll a success on a check to escape or a saving throw against an effect that would impose the grabbed or restrained condition on you, you get a critical success instead. Okay, so you get that stepped up by one layer. Whenever a creature rolls a failure on a check to grapple you, they get a critical failure instead. And if a creature uses the grab ability on you, it must succeed at an athletics check to grab you instead of automatically grabbing you. That is, they would have to roll twice, first for the grab, and then they have to make an extra athletics check because you are squirmy and you get away because you do not like being held. Now, what does this have to do with anything? This is actually very flavorful based on the narrative history presented at the beginning of this section about halflings, which I didn't go over because I'm trying to make this as short a video as possible. I'm already probably at an hour here. The idea is that halflings hate forced servitude, okay, including slavery, including indentured servitude. They hate it and they fight against it. They are very heavily invested in resisting that type of item. They are very much for bodily autonomy and autonomy of action. And so this unfettered halfling feat is a really, really flavorful one, even if it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal. It's very flavorful. Watchful halfling, you get a +2 circumstance bonus to perception checks when you're sensing motive and for some other things. Okay. 5th level feats here, cultural adaptability. You gain an adopted ancestry general feat. That is, you can basically choose another ancestry and you can get a 1st level ancestry feat from another ancestry. So it doesn't have to be a halfling ancestry. That's because you're so adaptable and you fit in so well with other ancestries that you've learned from what they do and how they do things. And so that has given you the ability to take one of their feats, basically. Halfling Weapons Trickster, that's just your 2nd version of Weapon Familiarity. 9th level, Guiding Luck. You have to have taken the Halfling Luck feat first. This one allows you to aim blows unerringly. You can use Halfling Luck twice per day now instead of just once, and once in response to its normal trigger, and once when you fail a perception check or attack roll instead of the normal trigger from the regular Halfling Luck. And Irrepressible, you ward off attempts to play on your fears and emotions. When you roll a success on a saving throw against an emotion effect, you get a critical success instead. Also, if you were a Gutsy Halfling as your heritage, when you roll a critical failure, it instead becomes a regular failure rather than a critical failure. And then the 13th level feats for halflings are Ceaseless Shadows, which is the 2nd step up of Distracting Shadows, because this has a prerequisite, and you excel at going unnoticed, especially among a crowd. You no longer need to have cover to be concealed, to hide, or sneak. Okay. Also, it has a take cover benefit there. And then the other level 13 feat, Halfling Weapon Expertise. Again, it's that 3rd step from Halfling Weapon Familiarity. And then when we look at what it says about halfling adventurers, halflings' natural wanderlust and opportunistic nature make them ideal adventurers. Many people put up with their vivacious attitudes in return for the natural talents they provide and the popular superstition that traveling with halflings is good luck. Typical backgrounds for halflings include acrobat, criminal, emissary, entertainer, laborer, and street urchin. Halflings make great clerics or rogues, but many also become monks or rangers. First ancestry that has been suggested to be a monk, which is very interesting to me. And last but not least, the human ancestry is actually quite interesting because of the way that they did the half-elf and half-orc, because half-elf and half-orc are actually heritages under the human ancestry. So we get the typical setup here with the format. You get a physical description. You get some information about names, ethnicities. Okay. Now, the reason it's calling out ethnicities in this particular section rather than, and it didn't do that for the other ancestries, is that there is actually a section in this book in the Age of Lost Omens chapter, which is down here, that tells you about the different ethnicities and cultures in Galarian, the default setting for Pathfinder 2. And so let's talk about the mechanical bits about humans here quickly. You get 8 hit points. You're a medium-sized creature. Your speed is 25. That's pretty typical. We've now seen that that's not very different amongst any of the other ancestries. But the ability boosts are different. You get 2 free ability boosts. That is, you get to pick which attributes. But it's not 3. All the other ones get 2 described boosts, and then you get to pick a 3rd free one. Here you just get 2 that you pick, and there's not a 3rd one. Okay. Also, your language is many fewer languages. You only get common, and then your intelligence bonus, number of extra languages. Okay. Your traits are human and humanoid. Now, half-elves are a sort of separate ancestry and a sort of heritage of humans. And the reason I say it like that is because in the other entries here, if we go back here and we look the way this is set up, it says, for example, Halfling Heritages, and it's in this blue sort of section heading style, right? And that's what we're going to see for half-elves, but notice it doesn't actually use the word heritage. It's just implied. So half-elves are a human heritage. And basically what it says is that when you create a half-elf, you select the half-elf heritage, so you're a human ancestry, you select half-elf heritage, and now you have access to the elf ancestry feats and the human ancestry feats. Okay? Similarly, when you have a half-orc, you are a human ancestry, and then you pick, okay, you pick from the human feats and the orc feats or half-orc feats, okay? So that's what you get. That's what it means to be half. And then it gives this little sidebar. It says, by default, half-elves and half-orcs descend from humans. That is, it's a human and an elf made a half-elf, a human and an orc made a half-orc, but your GM might allow you to be the offspring of an elf, orc, or different ancestry. In these cases, the GM will let you select the half-elf or half-orc heritage as the heritage for the other ancestry, and the most likely other parent of a half-elf are gnomes and halflings, and the most likely other parents of a half-orc are goblins, halflings, and dwarves. So you can actually be a half-orc that is not half-human and half-orc, but is dwarf and orc, or halfling and orc. And in that case, you would pick from the orc, half-orc ancestry feats, and also you would get access to the halfling ones, for example. Okay? And then it tells you some more about playing them and the different ideas about them. And then it gives you some human heritages. Okay? And so now it's actually showing you that half-elf is actually a human heritage and half-orc is a human heritage. And you can also, if you don't want to be a half-elf or half-orc, you can be full human and take the skilled heritage, which gives you some extra skill feats. Or you can be a versatile heritage human, so you are not a half-orc or half-elf, you are a versatile heritage, so you actually get a general feat of your choice, and you get to choose from the human ancestry feats. And so here are the human ancestry feats, and this is where the traits are important. So you can learn a cantrip, you can get a +4 circumstance bonus on your checks to aid another in the combat or exploration phase. You can take a general training feat, okay? Haughty obstinacy, your powerful ego makes it hard for others to order you around. If you roll a success on a saving throw against a mental effect that attempts to direct or control your actions, you critically succeed instead. So while humans are adaptable and they basically get along with everybody, they can also be stubborn and they don't want to be told what to do. Okay? Natural ambition, very similar kind of idea. You were raised to be ambitious and always reach for the stars, leading you to progress quickly in your chosen field. You gain a first level class feat for your class. So you get an extra feat. Okay? You have to meet the prerequisites, but you get an extra feat. You can have natural skill, so your ingenuity allows you to learn a wide variety of skills. You gain trained proficiency in 2 skills. This is very similar to the dwarven and elven lore and halfling lore feats that dwarves, elves, and halflings get. Unconventional weaponry. Okay, here we are. This is your weapon familiarity, right? This allows you to familiarize yourself with a particular weapon, potentially from another ancestry or culture. You choose an uncommon, simple, or martial weapon with a trait corresponding to an ancestry. That is, you can choose dwarf, elf, goblin, whatever, or that is common in another culture. Okay, and so this lets you sort of cross-train and use the weapon implements that are common in other places. 5th level feats, adaptive adept. If you chose adapted cantrip, you can now actually accentuate that. Okay, so now you can cast 3rd level spells. Clever improviser lets you gain untrained improvisation, general feat. Okay, and you attempt skill actions that normally would require you to be trained, even if you're untrained. 9th level feat, cooperative soul. You've developed a soul deep bond with your comrades and maintain an even greater degree of cooperation with them. You had to take cooperative nature in the first place. That's the one that lets you get a +4 to your aid. That's this one right here. Gets a +4 to your aid check. Okay, so you can be really, really cooperative and really build on that teamwork. Now, I want to say this real quick too. In Pathfinder 2, teamwork is really important, especially during combat. because everybody should be trying to help each other in positioning correctly or to the best of their ability, and buffing and helping and aiding other people during combat encounters and during exploration phases. Okay. Next, incredible improvisation. It's a 9th level feat. You have to have clever improviser first. You attempt a check using a skill you're untrained in. This gives you a +4 circumstance bonus to that triggering skill check. Okay. Multi-talented, 9th level feat. You've learned to split your focus between multiple classes with ease. You gain a 2nd level multi-class dedication feat. We'll talk about multi-classing and feat archetypes and all that later on. Even if you normally couldn't take another dedication feat until you take more feats from your current archetype. So the way that works is, in order to multi-class, you take a dedication feat, and then you can't take another multi-class feat until you take at least 2 more in that same dedication class, okay? And then you could take a different one if you wanted to. This basically makes it so that you don't need to take 2 more in that one. Okay, you can actually be multi-talented and take many more dedication feats. And then the 13th level, unconventional expertise, it allows you, it's the unconventional weapon. This is your weapon familiarity revisited, okay, just with different weapons. Now, half-orc and half-elf ancestry feats, you'll notice they all have the half-elf tag or the half-orc tag. So if you're a half-elf, you can choose elf ancestry feats or human ancestry feats or half-elf ancestry feats. So you get a much wider pool of feats to choose from. Okay, and so I'm not going to read through all these, but you get the idea. There's only 1st and 5th level ones, okay, and there are not a ton of them, just a few. Here's your half-orc one. So again, you get to choose from orc or half-orc, and you could see that this has actually the orc tag, not the half-orc tag, okay, or humans if you're a half-orc that has a human ancestry. So you get a wider range, although there aren't as many of these feats as there are from the other ancestries, right? So monstrous peacemaker or orc ferocity, which is a reaction, orc superstition, which is a reaction. Here's your orc weapon familiarity, right? So you get the idea that some of these are very similar to what we've seen with other individuals, okay? And then that is the end of the human ancestry section. It's actually the end of all the ancestry section. And you'll notice that one thing it didn't do was tell us anything about, well, what do human adventurers do, right? There was a paragraph about every other type of ancestry except for humans, and there was no suggested human. That's because humans are good at everything. Okay, that's the whole idea of the humans, is that they're completely adaptable. They can learn anything. They can be any class. They can be good at any background. Okay, and so we don't need a paragraph that says they're good at everything, right? Or can be good at anything that they attempt. That's their sort of benefit, traditionally speaking, of the ancestry. Okay. Now let's look at backgrounds. And I'm not going to read all these to you, but I want to point out that backgrounds, okay, they give a couple of specific things. And every background is going to do a similar thing. It's going to tell you how you earned this background. For example, the Acolyte says you spent your early days in a religious monastery or a cloister. You may have traveled out into the world to spread the message of your religion, or because you cast away the teachings of your faith, but deep down you'll always carry within you the lessons you learned. So you might be adventuring because you're out leaving the cloister or leaving the monastery in order to learn more, or to maybe spread the word of your religion or your deity. Either way, whatever. That's where you learned most of the skills that you have right now at level 1. And so that's giving you just the sort of narrative idea of what's happening. And then it tells you get to choose 2 ability boosts. One has to be to intelligence or wisdom, and the other one's free. So you choose intelligence or wisdom, you give a +2 to one of those, and then you can pick anything else and you get another boost. Also, you are trained in religion and the scribing lore skill. You also gain the Student of the Canon skill feat. And so we'll talk about skill feats when we get there. That's a little bit later. So in other words, this background gives you a couple of ability boosts, it gives you a couple of skills, and it gives you a feat. Okay, and you're going to see the same thing throughout all of these backgrounds. Let's look at acrobat. In a circus or on the streets, you earned your pay by performing as an acrobat. You might have turned to adventuring when the money dried up, or simply decided to put your skills to better use. In other words, it gives you the narrative about what this skill kind of implies, and then it says, but here's why you're not doing that anymore. Here's why you became an adventurer, possibly. And now it tells you what you get from that. In this case, you choose 2 ability boosts. One has to be to strength or dexterity. The other one's free. Then you're trained in acrobatics and the circus lore skill. So lore, circus. And you gain steady balance skill feat. Okay? And that's how all of these work. You're going to get 2 boosts, one of them that has to be to your choice of one out of 2 things, and you're going to get a free boost. And then you're going to get a couple of skills. One's usually a lore skill and the other is not a lore skill. And then you're going to get a skill feat. And in fact, if we go through this entire thing, you're going to see that same thing for every background. Let's just pick a random one on the second page. Emissary. As a diplomat or messenger, you traveled to lands far and wide, communicating with new people and forming alliances where your stock and trade. Choose 2 ability boosts. There it is. One must be to intelligence or charisma. One's free. Okay, same as all the other backgrounds. Then you're trained in the society skill, okay, and a lore skill related to one city that you've visited. Okay, there's your lore skill and your regular skill. And now you gain the multilingual skill feat. There's your feat. Charlatan. You traveled from place to place, peddling false fortunes and snake oil in one town, pretending to be the royalty in exile to seduce a wealthy heir in the next. Becoming an adventurer might be the next big scam or an attempt to put your talents to use for a greater cause. Perhaps it's a bit of both, as you realize that after pretending to be a hero, you've become the mask. Choose 2 ability boosts. One must be to intelligence or charisma. One's free. There it is again, 2 ability boosts. One is prescribed, one is a free. You're trained in deception skill. There's your skill. And the underworld lore skill. There's your lore skill. And you gain the charming liar skill feat. So there's your feat. So you get a feat. You get 2 ability boosts. One of them is free. You get a skill, a lore skill, and a feat. Okay, and that's what all the backgrounds are going to give you. And remember that since this is part of character creation, if one of the skills that is part of the background is a skill that you got from a feat or from your heritage, you get to choose a different one, right? So if you, for example, choose herbalist, you get trained in the nature skill. If your background, if your ancestry already gave you the nature skill for some reason, you just choose a different one. It's not that it's a 0 sum and you don't get anything. You just choose a different one. You also don't raise it a level. It doesn't go from trained to expert. You just choose a different thing. Okay. And so that's the idea for backgrounds. And you can see, actually, all these backgrounds. There's a lot of them. Acolyte, Acrobat, Animal Whisperer, Artisan, Artist, Barkeep, Barrister. Look at this art, by the way. Look at he's got like the head of something there. It's really, really cool. And he's showing off his sword, right? Bounty Hunter, Charlatan, Criminal, Detective, Emissary, Entertainer, Farmhand, Field Medic, Fortune Teller, Gambler, Gladiator, Guard, Herbalist, Hermit, Hunter, Laborer, Martial Discipline, Merchant, Miner, Noble, Nomad, Prisoner, Sailor, and Scholar. Here's another nice little image there. And here's another image with some iconics. I think this is Sela the Paladin and Ezrin the Wizard. Okay. Scout, Street Urchin, Tinker, and Warrior. And that's the end of the backgrounds. Let's just look really quickly at the last background. In your younger days, you waded into battle as a mercenary, a warrior defending a nomadic people, or a member of a militia or army. You might have wanted to break out from the regimented structure of these forces, or you could have always been as independent a warrior as you are now. Choose 2 ability boosts. Shocking. One must be to strength or constitution, the other one's free. You're trained in intimidation and warfare lore. There's your skill and your lore, and you gain the intimidating glare feat. There you go. So you get a skill feat, you get a skill, you get a lore, and you get 2 ability boosts. And then the last part of this chapter is languages. I'll try to make this really quick. Basically, what it says is there's a lot of languages out there, and there are uncommon languages and there are common languages. It tells you what the language is and who usually speaks it. It includes sign language, okay, as a language that you can communicate with, okay. It talks about regional languages, and it points you to the entry in the Age of Lost Omens section where it's going to talk about more languages. And really this is just set up to allow you to think a little bit more deeply in terms of the languages. Now that you maybe you've bumped up your intelligence and you know that you're at least going to have a +1, now you can think about what languages you might want. There's not really any surprises in this section, and it is the end of chapter 2. So this has been a long chapter. It could have been much longer. I could have talked about every single feat and every single background and all of that, but all that's really important is I want you to get the idea that chapter 2 is really for you to choose an ancestry. I want you to understand how ancestries work now, how they use a common format, and in fact that format that they use in the ancestry section is the same type of format they're going to use for every other book that they publish with ancestries in it. It's always going to have some narrative bits, a thing about what you might do or how you might think about something, along with how others might perceive you if you choose that ancestry, and then some mechanical bits, something about names. Like, it's going to have that same thing because they're choosing a very, very they're choosing to create a format that is very consistent so that no matter what you're looking at, whether it's this book, or whether it's the beginning of chapter 2 or the end of the ancestry section, that you can understand what information it's trying to provide. Okay? And with that, I will say goodbye. Join us next time for chapter 3.